The issue of strategic leadership is something that usually comes up anytime we talk about leadership and the importance, really, of leaders understanding the purpose of really a strategic vision and how that can bring their organizations forward. One of the big challenges associated with this is the idea that we tend to view strategy in this box. We tend to view strategy as a pre-prescribed procedure that can be followed, or series of procedures. We'll have this sometimes referred to as generic strategies that can be used, step one, step two, step three, and this is how you do strategy. The problem with that approach, and it's been a popular approach, there's a lot of theorists that have pushed this forward. There's been a lot of authors, both popular press and also from more academic perspective, that have used this approach. The problem with that is because it is so procedural, we don't always think outside of the box. And the issue with strategy is it requires some thought process outside of the box. It's one of the reasons why we no longer get videos from Blockbuster or go get books from Borders Bookstore. The reason why we might not go to Radio Shack to get cords or wires or whatever we might need for our electronic devices. These are just a few examples of some companies where the leaders didn't really stay ahead of what was happening, and they really weren't innovative within their fields. They may have been at a time, but they weren't aware of what else was happening in the market. So certainly this issue of strategic leadership is incredibly important. And now I mentioned that idea of innovation because to talk about strategy, we really need to talk about how important it is to remain innovative, to remain creative in this process. And again, this is something that stands somewhat in contrast to some traditional views of strategic management. But when we look at this from a perspective of strategic leadership, we take it a step further. We don't just stop at using generic strategies or looking at what's always been done. We take the opportunity to look at things from another perspective. A great way to actually look at this, I had a student say this many years ago, strategic leadership or creative leadership is a lot about thinking outside of the box. And you'll notice I'm using that term strategic and creative leadership interchangeably. There's a reason for that. I think the approach that we need to take towards strategy needs to come from a very creative and a very innovative place. We need to not be afraid to try new things. We need to understand this. Certainly, we need to do the research involved and understand the market and do a cost analysis as well as many other things that we might need to do. But we need to not be afraid to try new things. And this is one of those challenges of leadership. It's one of those things that comes up when we're talking about trying to take our organizations in a new direction or trying to address an issue or problem that might be beyond our control. Such as some external issue with new policies, with new government laws or regulations. But we need to not be afraid to try those new things. One of the problems associated with this, though, is oftentimes the leaders don't have all the information that they need, which means they have to rely on their followers. It also requires them that they trust their followers and that they don't treat their followers like they're idiots. So there's been a lot of talk about making sure we have the right kinds of people in our organization, but we also need to know how to adapt when we don't have everybody that we may need. And how can we play to our strengths and how can we actually move our organizations forward? So the issue of strategy really comes down to that, to a leader's ability not only to think outside of the box, but to work with other individuals within their organization that can also try new things and look at things from a new perspective. So if we were to really sum up that whole issue of strategic leadership, again, from my perspective, it really would be the ability to look at things from a new perspective, to have a vision for the future, and to get other people on board to help out with that process.